Welcome back to Not So Grand Garage. This morning we're out in the shop working on a real common problem on these WK Grand Cherokees, front differential bushings. So if you've noticed, whenever you shift from drive to reverse, reverse to drive, park to drive, so on and so forth, put the drivetrain under a load, you notice a clunk that almost feels like something smacking the floor pan. More than likely, you've got issues with the front differential bushings. So we're going to tackle it on this one. As you can see, I've already got it up on the lift, and here is the little bushing set we're going to be using. The owner didn't want to pony up for factory bushings. That this thing's only got 100,000 miles on it, and they are trashed. So he didn't want to go that route and didn't want to go poly bushings. So we decided to give these Amazon specials a try. I think the whole set was like 40 bucks, something like that. So we'll see. They can be hit and miss on quality control, but the ones that seem to be decent hold up well. The ones that aren't, they typically don't fit or something along those lines. So we'll figure that out when we tear into it. The fun part's going to be trying to do this without dropping the front differential. There's a couple different ways that it can be done, and we're gonna try both of them probably, but we'll see. So to give you an idea of what's going on with this one, I'll show you what it looks like when these front differential bushings fail. I'll grab a hold of the tire and put this under a load, and you'll notice the whole differential jumps, which makes it feel like something's smacking the floor pan when you shift from drive to reverse, reverse to drive. As you can tell, I was just spinning this tire by hand, and yeah, has no weight on it right now either. So under a load of the engine transmission with weight on it, you can imagine that differential's flexing a lot more than it was when I was doing by hand. So we're gonna see if we can get these bushings ripped out and replaced without tearing the whole front end apart. So let's see what happens. Now that we're under here, as you can see, this bushing right here is pretty straightforward to change. It can be changed pretty easily. 2 bolts here, and then these 3 right here. And this whole piece will come off the front of this. Of course, the differential will have to drop down a little bit to get that out. That's not really a big deal. This one over here, which is on the passenger side, also not a big deal as far as getting to it without taking the differential completely out. Take the center bolt out, drop it down. There's enough room for that. And should be able to get this one cut out and a new one pressed in without much issue. But the fun one is this one up top on the driver's side. And of course, that is the one, let's see here if I can catch it on, that is trashed and causing most of the racket. So I'm going to try to unbolt the drive shaft, unbolt the mounts, lower this differential down to where the CVs come down to the lower control arms, and see if that'll give me enough room to get to that top one. If not, I'll jack it back up in place, pull the front tires off, and drop the upper ball joints out, which from my understanding will give me enough room to pull the axle shafts out of the front diff without having to disassemble both ends. And if I can do that, then I can drop the differential down and out of the chassis without any real problems. and it'll save a lot of time, which is the goal. I prefer to save the customer as much time as I can, because time is money. So we're going to try and do this as easily as possible, but we'll see how it goes. Just a note when pulling this drive shaft, pulling these flange bolts, and more than likely the bolts for the mounts and everything else, get yourself a propane torch and heat this flange up right here where each bolt threads into it. It doesn't have to get super hot, but that heat will let that Loctite, factory Loctite, release. And I tell you, it'll make it a lot easier to get these bolts out, and you won't fight it as much. I could double wrench these bolts and they wouldn't budge, but heating them up lets me spin it out with a wrench. So heat the flange up a little bit. Don't get it so hot that you're hurting the seal behind it or anything else. It doesn't have to be super hot, just enough to break the bond of this thread locker. And the factory thread locker on these things is no joke. So yeah, a little bit of heat goes a long way. Okay, got the drive shaft disconnected, and after looking things over, with that bushing way up there being the problem, and the limited amount of space I've got to drop this differential down, I think the best route to take is going to be pull these front tires off, knock the upper ball joints out, and slip these CV shafts out and just drop the differential to the ground. I think that's going to be the fastest route to be able to replace all three bushings. If I was just replacing this one and this one, it wouldn't be a big deal to do it in chassis, but I think it's a waste of time to try and replace that one way up there by dropping this down. I just don't think there's enough room. So we're going to skip that method and go straight to dropping this differential, but we're going to do it without pulling the CVs completely out, without having to disassemble both sides. All we're going to do is knock ball joints out, possibly disconnect tie rod ends, just if it doesn't give us enough room to pivot the knuckle out of the way. But yeah, so let's slide out from under here and get these tires off and go from there. So starting on the driver's side, got the tire off obviously, disconnected this upper ball joint, which is really simple. Just a little bit of heat on the nut, back the nut right off, smack this on this pad with a hammer. Doesn't take much, and that ball joint, this tapered seat, will pop right out of the knuckle. Same goes for the tie rod end, which we just put new tie rod ends on this the last time it was here, so this all came apart pretty easy. But now, as you can see, we've got quite a bit of room to work with. And if you disconnect this tie rod end, you can turn the knuckle so it doesn't stretch on this brake line, stretch on wiring and stuff like this. Everything's still loose, but we've still got a lot of room to play with. So I'm gonna slide under here and take my take a pry bar in behind the CV where it goes into the differential and see if I can pop that loose and see if we've got enough room to get the shaft out of the differential without taking anything else apart. So let's see how that goes. Now, this popped loose. If you've got a nice broad tip chisel that's not, or a punch that's not sharp so it won't damage the back side of this, that you can get in and just catch that, give it a good smack, and it'll pop it out of the, it'll pop that lock ring out. Be ready with a drain pan, because as you can see, it's going to be leaking. We'll have to refill the diff after the fact, obviously, so we'll go on and service the diff while we've got it apart. But I'm gonna slide out, grab a drain pan, and then see if we can get this axle shaft all the way out. And if we can, will be golden. First problem, we'll need to disconnect this wire. It's not tight yet, so I haven't got it pulled tight or anything, but I'm gonna go on and disconnect it from the back side of the strut, so it'll give us a good bit more wiggle room. And then we should have enough room. Might have to pull this bolt here out of this brake line to give it some wiggle room too, but should have enough room to get this out. It's almost all the way out as it is. So I'll get this disconnected and see how it goes. Okay, I did go on and remove this mounting bolt here to give us a little extra wiggle room so we didn't pull anything tight. That is barely sitting inside the differential. So I'm gonna go on and pull the passenger side apart and do the same thing over there. And when I drop the differential down, I will just work these shafts out. Shouldn't be a big deal, but I should be able to leave the rest of this together. So really about 10 minutes worth of work to get to this point from the wheel side. So pulling the tire, knocking the ball joint and tie rod in loose. This will be a lot faster and will make things a lot easier to go on and just get that differential on the ground. I got the passenger side pulled apart just like the driver's side. Released that clip holding the wire in place, pulled that bolt there, so got some wiggle room. Everything's good and loose, nothing's pulled tight. Had plenty of room to drop the CV out on this side. So this side's all disconnected, which should leave me enough room when I pull the mount bolts for the differential to slide the differential towards the passenger side and get it the rest of the way off that CV shaft. Come straight down. So at this point, all that's left is the vent line for the diff and the 3 mount bolts. We'll drop it down, get it out on the floor, and go from there. Okay, got all the front diff mounts are loose. Got these 2 bolts loose. Got the nut off of that one and this one. So everything is loose. So I'm gonna go on and slide a jack under here to support this just a little bit and pop these bolts out and let this straight down, hopefully. And there we have it. Differentials on the ground. And this one is our problem child. I'd say it's trashed. The other ones don't look too bad. I mean, that one's actually in good shape. As this one's a little soft here. Looks like it's starting to separate out. So I may leave this one just because it's a factory bushing and more than likely is far better than the cheap Amazon replacements that the owner ordered. But I'm going to replace this one here and this one back here. So let's see how that goes. Sorry for the noise, had to kick the air compressor on. Here's our replacement bushing. It looks to be pretty decent. It's probably a little softer than factory, but we'll see how it holds up. I'm gonna try to knock this out with the air hammer. I really don't want to have to cut it out. It's kind of a pain, but if I do, it's whatever. But I'm gonna try and drive it out with the air hammer, see how that goes, and hopefully we can just get this knocked out pretty quick. Yahtzee. Now we've got our new bushing. I'm gonna clean this bore up a little bit with maybe some emery cloth or something. Got a little bit of an edge right here I want to knock off, but just not gonna open this up, but just take some of the corrosion out of it. Put a little grease on this bushing, and then I will use my ball joint press and cups to press this back in. Alrighty, got it seated all the way in there. I ended up just grabbing my one of my bushing install cups, drivers, and just driving it the rest of the way in with a hammer. And yeah, it was in there far enough to where it didn't take much to seat it. So now I'm going to unbolt this one from the housing, 3 bolts, swap it out, and the diff is ready to go back in. So just noticed an interesting thing that I figured I would note. This is the OEM bushing. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the bushing says Canada. It's embossed in the rubber, and it says 66549 for the bushing part number. This is the cheap one that just came out of our Amazon kit. Also embossed. Canada 66549. So either this is a really good repop bushing as far as being a counterfeit, or this is an OEM bushing. Now, as far as the steel and everything on this bracket goes, looks to be on par with the factory one. And this factory replacement is almost $200. This came with the other 2 bushings, the one I've already put in, for like $35. So if I remember correctly, he may have paid more. I think this kit might have been like 50 or 60. I'd have to double check. I'll drop the link to this specific kit in the description. But yeah, seems like this is a factory part, or close enough. All right, got the 2 bushings swapped out, and it is time to put everything back together. So I'm not gonna bore you with that, but yeah, just gonna reverse the process. I'll work the driver's side CV in as the differential goes up, and get everything bolted in and see if our clunk is gone. I've also got a few other things to do on this, which I'm not going to bore you with, but I'll get this in and let you see the aftermath. Well, I just got done topping the differential off with Valvoline 75-140 full synthetic oil. Just hooked up the diff breather as well. So I've checked it over, spun the tire by hand like I did before. There's no clunk, everything seems nice and tight. So I've got a few other things to button up on this, but yeah, so far it looks like it's good to go. But I will update you if that changes. If these bushings fail quickly or something like that, I'll put something out. I told the owner that you know, I couldn't really warranty them because, you know, I didn't buy them, and they were a cost-effective solution, if we want to put it that way. So we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. But this was a fairly simple process. It was a little time consuming, 3.5, 4 hours, something like that. But it's done and should be good to go. So I'm gonna call this one off here. If you have any comments, questions, anything like that, drop them in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We appreciate you watching.